When the world gets better, let's build a better world.
Of better values and choices.
With cleaner homes, cleaner energy, cleaner coastlines. With better products from better materials.
Using less, but giving more.
When the world gets better, let's just get better and better. Miele, immer besser.
Welcome again to Future Food System. I'm really excited to have Clive Blazey here, whose book that was given to me by Jenny's grandmother about 25 years ago was How to Feed a Family on, I think it was 100 square meters or something like that.
10 square meters.
There you go, 10 square meters. And it just blew my mind because I'd always grown up. My dad grew his own food and we had our own veggie patch, but it really made me realize that if you interplant and you do things, you know, you crop rotate and you use plants a certain way, you can actually get a lot more productivity. So that's really what the big inspiration, that was a big inspiration for the greenhouse back in 2008. I kind of, you know, it really just made me believe in this idea even more. And ultimately this building here, which I've planted to there's not a lot of space left, as you can see outside. Every single square inch is planted with beans.
Even in the bedroom, I see.
So yeah, and Clive is coming out with a new book. And so we're here to talk about his new book, but we're also, I'd love to ask you about, so Diggers started back in the late 70s, is that right?
We started in 72.
Wow.
And
I wasn't even born in 72.
Neither were my children, thank God. So that's, I think it's 43 years that we've been going, but I've sort of been gardening for, my first garden was when I was up at a boarding school at Timbertop. You know, that's where Geelong Grammar did their outdoor ed, and that's where I developed my passion for the wilderness. So I actually scratched out a garden in front of our unit, you know, in the wet weekends when it was too nasty to go out.
Yeah, right.
And then I really didn't do much until I renovated a few terrace houses and things like that and set up a garden with a mate of mine. He had the space and I didn't, so that was my first vegetable garden. Had a bit of success. We actually had, you know, we grew zucchinis like that. Not knowing in those days that you pick them, you know, the first day, not the 8th day or whatever. And then, of course, we moved down to Heronswood when we needed some space. Yeah. So that's when we all got serious about it, and then we started hiring gardeners. So,
and your father had a seed business, is that?
Yeah, no, my father started up Hortico, so that was just before the war.
Yep.
And he wasn't actually a gardener himself, like fingers in the soil, but Hortico was into, you know, fertilizers and pesticides, and he was the scientific part of it all. And we had a garden in Balwyn. Mother was a keen gardener, but I guess I was the first of the family that took it completely on board.
Yep.
And when I was working for Hortico, we took over a very old seed company, Law Sumner Seed, so that was roughly 100 years old at the time.
An Australian company.
An Australian company. Yates was the dominant brand in those days, and so I was keen to get into seeds. That was you know, there's this tiny little particle that produces this amazing life is what I suppose was the most exciting thing about seeds.
Yeah.
And then, you know, to cut it all short, basically going to the Seed Savers network in the States was where you know, my mind was blown, seeing, you know, 1,000 different varieties of things that I'd never seen. So when we go to a supermarket and you just see a supermarket cucumber, when you see the full gamut of the genetic diversity, there's probably 50 different forms of it. In Australia, we grow the crystal apple, which is, you know, that round one.
Yeah.
But anything other than the supermarket. So, you know, the supermarkets had got hold of everything, you know, so we had red tomatoes and we had supermarket cucumbers and we had Great Lakes lettuce, you know, the range was appalling. And then when you went to Seed Savers and you saw this amazing collection of everything, and they had collected about 20,000 different varieties of all the seeds that gardeners would use. And when I got there, there was a guy who was actually detasseling corn. And now if you don't do that, you get cross-pollination. So normally you'd have to separate your male parts from your female parts by, a couple of miles.
Yep.
But what he was doing was cutting off the tassels and shaking the pollen and making sure he pollinated on the site and made sure he didn't cross.
Yeah, wow.
So if he stopped to talk to me on that day, it meant about 50 varieties of corn would be lost. So having not done that myself, I just helped him.
Yeah.
And as we got talking, I got on with him famously. He didn't offer me lunch actually till about 4:30. But
that's because you were probably getting too much done.
Anyway, he knew all the stuff that I didn't know. And so I said to him, why don't you come out to Australia? And I didn't realise at that stage that, he's a world-famous botanist and he'd written books.
Wow.
And he was, the great expert on seed saving. And so we asked him out and he brought 100 varieties of tomatoes, which we tested in our gardens, and we did the taste test with Stephanie and all the top chefs.
Yep.
And then the whole thing took over. And David Cavagnaro from the Seed Savers came out 5 times. And so he got enormous attention for us. He got onto the pages of The Age and went round the country. In fact, he's threatened to come back, or he was saying, because he's a bit older than me actually, he said, I think there's one more trip in me. And I responded within about 10 seconds and said, yes, yes, yes. And then he thought about it carefully and thought he had to close up, the work that he's doing there. So I think we'll get him, but not as quickly as I'd hoped.
Well, did you ever meet Alex Potelinski?
I've written to him, but I didn't meet him personally.
Yeah, I remember. Well, I think he passed away 2 years ago when he was 93. Yeah. But the year before he passed away, he still did a tour of Europe, which he had done 54 years in a row.
Right.
And he did 340 lectures in his 92nd year. And he was determined to go back again because he had unfinished business. He didn't make it back for another trip. But
I think when you're driven, even if you haven't got any energy, your brain's still going, and you've got to try and make sure you get the work done before it's too long.
And are you... I know that in the 70s there was a big movement in Europe and America towards seed saving and protecting what we have. It kind of went down a bit. And do you feel that there's a resurrection again of that?
Look, the convenience of the supermarket tomato, which is a shelf life of 30 days or something, still beats heirlooms, because the heirlooms have got into the supermarkets, but they're not as cheap as hybrids.
Yep.
And glasshouses, you would know from Holland, is pretty much the way of the future as far as I can see. So. Yep. Trying to get heirlooms to adapt to that completely scientific approach is going to be a bit tricky. The great thing about heirloom tomatoes, of course, is they ripen and they'll rot, whereas hybrids, which are rock hard, never have the flavour, but they've got the shelf life, so the supermarkets don't have to throw stuff out, whereas anything that isn't a hybrid will deteriorate over time, and the shelf life puts the shops off it. So that's why it's really a backyard.
Yeah, I personally think that we're moving away from that constant, having tomatoes every week of the year. I think we're moving back towards appreciating what's in season and eating more things through the winter and not eating those, because then you celebrate them more. I'm picking the first blueberries now, and if you eat blueberries all winter from northern Queensland or wherever they come from, you don't appreciate the first ones as much as if you haven't had them all winter and then the first blueberries come,
Exactly. But look, heirlooms are really concentrated in, you know, the gardens of the passionate and farmers markets and the chefs. But the supermarkets, I guess, will still control it with the hybrids. You know, the non-ripening is the key thing for a supermarket. But you know, I don't shop in supermarkets. I try to avoid them, so I can get pretty much, even in winter time, I can get heirlooms if I haven't grown them myself.
Yeah, yeah. No, there seems to be a lot of people out there that are growing things in backyards. And
well, the COVID's brought an enormous number of new entrants into the market, which is very exciting for us. Our membership's got to
sell almost 5 years worth of seed in 1 year. I know the Dutch seed companies said that they sold 7 years worth of seed in 1 year or something. It was
yes. The first month our sales went up 8-fold, and as you would know, if you're lucky, you might have 50% left. We had 5 years of seed stock, so it didn't last. We didn't run out of seed actually, because the thing didn't go on for a whole year. But it's had 3 rises. You know, we're getting another boom because of the COVID this year. So it's all good. It's got people out into backyards. It's got people talking. Gardening Australia does a fantastic job. You're doing a fantastic job here. We've had to close our gardens, which has prevented us from doing much of an education job, but they're now open again. So yeah, and with you know, our membership's now 87,000 club members around the country. So we've had a big lift as a consequence of COVID.
One of my favourite things is getting the quarterly catalogue, and there's always, you know, and that's actually my mum's been a member for a long time, and
has she?
And it was really one of the first. It possibly is the very first time that I read about the problems with glyphosate. It must be 20 plus years ago. Yeah,
no, well, we've been banging on about it. I see that they've banned it in the US. They had 12,000 cases, which I think are mainly coming from gardeners as distinct from farmers. The farmers don't think of the planet quite like us backyard gardeners do. So I hope that would happen here.
Well, the Mexican government have said that they're going to completely ban it. For farmers and for gardens.
Well, it's an interesting proposition because we went down to the local council.
Well, actually, before you go there, so where did you first become aware that there was a problem? Because I remember reading an article, and it was a long time ago. But and you brought someone out from America who was trying to let people know that this is going to be a problem in the future if we keep using this. Well, so how did you first become aware of?
Oh, look. You don't answer it. Oh God, I can't. Sorry. Well, look, we fought the case for that farmer in Western Australia, so we funded it and supported it. So a canola grower, his genes of the canola plant had spread into this organic farmer's land, and consequently he was sued for theft, because that's really what the law says about genetically modified organisms. You have to sign. You know, you can't buy seeds of this stuff. You're stuck with.
You can't save seeds from it. You have to buy new seed every year.
That's right, and the whole point of it is to take over the seed market. So we fought the case, and in fact,
just so for people that don't know, what was the distance between the two farms? Was it 20 kilometres or something?
No. He was a next door farm. So it would have blown in. In all these cases, it's not that someone would want to steal the stuff. I don't think farmers aren't.
Especially if you're an organic farmer, you're probably growing a variety that you.
So the organic farmer lost his whole livelihood because, in a sense, biological life isn't patented, but for some reason, genetic modification was the first patenting of biological systems, and that happened maybe 10 years before Monsanto really got zero or glyphosate out. So that goes back about 20 years, there were a lot of there were a lot of farmers that came out here. So mates of mine were doing most of the prosecution. So I was a bit of a Johnny-come-lately to it. But we've been actively fighting it for our members at least for 20 years.
Yeah.
And you know, we're such a small fry that, you know, you have to be careful what you write and say. You don't really want to be served with a writ, but just about everyone in gardening is against it. So, but it's still there. Roundup or glyphosate is still on the market, unfortunately. We still haven't got it banned, which we'd like to do.
I am, you know, it is good to see so many cities coming out around the world, and one after the other, and Sri Lanka and all these other countries saying no more. You know?
Well, so far they've had to I think the court cases have cost them $12 billion. I mean, the company's worth 60 billion or something. So, you know, we might actually defeat them in the end. But most of that's happening in the States, but also Europe too. Yeah. So Bayer now owns Monsanto. So it's the big chemical company that's taken it over.
Now, obviously, one of the reasons for growing your own food is because you know the soil that it's grown in, you know that it hasn't been sprayed, and you know, also I find that people that grow their own food waste a lot less because you've grown it.
Yep.
You use it, you preserve it, you give it away to your friends or whatever. It's one of the reasons why I love it so much as well. But most importantly, it's the flavour, like those first raspberries that you pick or the first carrots that you pull out of the ground. And I think that that's one of the reasons why people have become so taken with growing their own food as well, because if you want the best flavour, then you need to grow your own food.
Well, the chefs are all onto it, and of course in farmers markets you can get access to it. Our task is to really get the home gardeners into it. So, you know, we sell about 500 varieties of seeds, and I think we list about 3 or 4 hybrids. There's a broccoli, which I think does better than an OP. So we're not completely bigoted against hybrids, but the problem with hybrids really is that it gives the company control over the seed supply. So you can't collect seed of a hybrid and expect it to reproduce and be true to type.
Yep.
So that's how inadvertently they've got control of the seed market, at least in the supermarkets.
Yep.
But you know, there's a lot of opposition around the world, so it's not all over. It's not all over yet.
No. Now, your passion lately has been, I know you're setting up an arboretum, and your passion is trees.
Yep.
And you're about to release a book. And do you want to show everyone what this book?
Yes. Well, I've been a great fan of the Dr. Zeus, the Lorax. So I used to read all these Lorax stories to my kids. So that's where that quote comes from. We speak for the trees. That's actually straight out of the Loraxes. But there's a bit of logic to it too. Most of us, if we grow a crop of tomatoes, we know a fair bit about that tomato in 1 year. With trees, you need to have been on the planet for more than 100 years.
Yeah.
So you pick up the knowledge slowly. And, you know, I've travelled to most of the botanic gardens in the country, so from Brisbane to Sydney to Hobart to Melbourne and to Adelaide. So I go around there picking out all the trees that are doing well. And there are 2 areas which are really underdeveloped. The rainforest trees, well, we call them rainforest. So they come from the evergreen trees, and we grow them. They've come down from northern New South Wales, but they're adaptable to every capital city. Not all of them, but the ones that we've chosen. And they're also fast growing, but the most important thing is they're not flammable like eucalypts. So
high moisture content.
Most people grow eucalypts because they're very fast. There's serious problems growing eucalypts, apart from the fact that they're very flammable. you know, they poison the soil around the base. So, you know, they've got this amazing system to beat off all sort of competition. They also hang their leaves down straight. So, you know, if you look at good broadleaf trees, the leaf is probably flat so that you're getting shade underneath. That's typical of oak trees. But the eucalypt, if you look carefully, tends to hang down. And so the temperatures under eucalypt trees on summer days is sometimes 15 to 20 degrees hotter under a eucalypt than they are under a good shade tree. So we've gone around our gardens on 43 degree days, and we've started measuring that temperature. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why climate change is a huge problem, because, you know, 80% of the trees grown in this country are eucalypts, and they're almost the worst shade tree, or the worst tree you could have to cool your garden. And there's lots of...
I was in Brazil, and we were going into the Amazon. Not Brazil. We were in Iquitos, and we did I can't remember how many days, 10 days, that we went into the Amazon with a botanist.
Yeah.
And we introduced ourselves, and I told him, you know, Joost, he said, you know, is that Dutch? I said, well, I'm actually from Australia. And he said, I like Australians, but I don't like Australian trees. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, your eucalypts will ultimately destroy the Amazon. And I said to him, why? And he said, well, we're clearing the Amazon, and then we plant a crop, and there's not a lot of topsoil, so maybe 1 or 2 crops, and then the only thing that they'll do a bit of grazing, and then they'll plant trees, and the only thing that will grow is a eucalypt. Yep. And so during the wet season, the lightning strikes, it hits the Amazon, it just doesn't, because it's so moist.
Yep.
But it hits the eucalypt forests that are all planted, and we're getting bushfires for the first time. So that's 20 years ago. No,
well, once the soil temperatures get over 50 degrees, basically you're killing all living things like seeds and plants. I'm not quite sure how many days that has to be, but that's the consequence of what's happening in this particular country. And we've really got to make better choices. Well, you live in the Dandenongs. You've had wind damage recently.
4 million trees, they're saying, have been just in the Dandenong Ranges alone.
Yeah. Well, during the bushfires last year, which were the worst, that I think we lost 30% of the trees in the forest areas between New South Wales and Victoria. And I drove through them, and normally after a bushfire you see this incredible sprouting and it looks like everything's okay, but I reckon when I was driving to Canberra about 3 months after that, it looked like it was completely dead. So the temperatures are now so high in some of these bushfires that the seeds in the ground are destroyed and the life in the ground. So, you know, we've actually got, in my opinion, a tipping point in terms of getting our trees right. Now, I'm not saying we plant rainforest trees in our forest, but I am saying in our gardens we've got better choices. And if you go to the Botanic Gardens just across the river here, there's some really fantastic trees in the dwarf eucalypts, you know, which are only maybe 3 or 4 metres high, and they branch out at the base, and they've got that fantastic colouring in the trunks, and you know, they'll still be flammable, but it's a much safer choice than having a big tall one. So we're going to list some of those.
I think that single species monoculture forests are a big problem as well. Planting like any species en masse, and it's a disaster from a bushfire.
No, I agree entirely. When you think of us gardeners, we drive past each other's gardens, and we may not like what we see, or it's not as good as we would like, but you see this incredible diversity. Everyone's got about 50 or 100 different shrubs, perennials and trees. But when you go out to the forest, you see one planting. When you go out to farms, all you see is canola grown, or wheat or corn. So, you know, this is a threat to biodiversity, which I think is absolutely crucial, that we start thinking about the right trees. We can still have fast growers. We can make sure that they give us fantastic shade, and we can make sure that they're not going to be flammable. And the City of Melbourne's doing an enormous amount of work on choosing the right trees for this particular area. Where I live in Northcote, the High Street, I don't know if you know it, but there isn't any shade there for about 10 miles.
I just don't get that.
I mean, the temperatures in summer at least 5 degrees hotter on the main street in Northcote to where the suburban gardens are out in the fringe.
Yep.
Now, climate change is only going to cost us 1.5 to 2 degrees. Well, at the moment, it's 1.5 in Australia, not 1 degree, which is the worldwide average. But, that 5 degrees that is already happening in the cities where we are now is absolutely catastrophic.
Yep.
And it's going to, it's making our cities unlivable. So, yeah, trees, apart from keeping the temperatures down, are absolutely crucial for us to connect back with nature. This is David Attenborough's strong argument. I don't know.
I think that Australia has this unbelievable opportunity through its farmers to start. There's so much money at the moment sitting with carbon credits, whether it's Qantas or Country Road or all these companies that are currently paying out carbon credits. They don't even know where they're going half the time. No. If we actually paid our farmers to plant trees, and I think there's something like 130,000 farmers in Australia, or farms. The average size is 4,000 acres. Even if they each planted just 10 trees a year, but actually got paid to plant them and not just plant them, but actually look after them, we could create wildlife corridors, shade for livestock. I mean, every farm, no matter where you are, you've got land that's unproductive or suffering erosion or just too wet or whatever. We should be planting trees. And I had Sustainability Victoria here yesterday and we discussed that. I said, this is something that the state government should support, because there aren't many countries in the world that have that opportunity where there's all this privately owned land where they could easily be paid to do this. And you've met Rowan Reed, but like Yan Yan Gert Farm in that's only 650 acres, but they've over the last 30 years locked up 30% of their land, and a lot of that was unproductive land. Suffering erosion and whatever. And they've planted 40,000 trees, 250 species, but have for the last few years been logging and replacing those trees, and so there's this incredible opportunity for timber, high-grade timber as well.
The other thing is, our current government, doesn't really want to engage the population in taking responsibility at all. Basically, what we can all do, if you and I both plant, it's 150 trees over 10 years, that will actually bring enough carbon back to Earth to give us the time to get the rest of the carbon problem solved. But anyway, we're talking during the COP 2025, aren't we? When it doesn't look like they've done enough. But what we're trying to do is engage gardeners or farmers to actually take a responsibility. And because we've got greater diversity and we all know how to grow seeds, we'll have more success, and we can do our bit and at least try and convert the rest of the population to doing something effective. The garden just across this river here, I would have been into it at least 250 times. I go around there, and I've been going there for 50 years. So I notice the trees I like, I notice the fast growth, I notice the shade potential. So all these things, we're blessed in this country that our botanic gardens are now so old that we've got 150-year-old specimens of these rainforest trees that I was telling you about to replace eucalypts. There they are, they're 80 feet high, and you can see that they can survive, and we know that they're going to grow from Brisbane to Sydney to Adelaide to Perth. So, this isn't taking any risk. This is what a botanic gardens was set up to do. So anyway, that's fantastic. That's a bit of the story about what's driven this book.
And so the Arboretum that you're working on.
Yeah, well, my father left me this fantastic piece of land on the Goulburn River at Trawall. It's about an hour and a bit from Melbourne. This is where we actually grew all our heirloom seeds. So when we
that book that I got from you 20 plus years ago
is based on all the research that we did up there. And
who was it that you worked with on that book again? It was
Will Truman was he was a fish farmer actually, and he was working for us in our backyard. And we'd got such an interest after the taste test, we didn't know who was going to run this farm. So Will Truman put up his hand. The most extraordinary good luck, because the guy had never farmed before. He was incredibly scientific. I didn't know he could fix up a tractor or fix up a fence. Anyway, he went up there and did all the work. So you've seen the book. And I hadn't actually asked him to do a PhD thesis, but, you know, he was a PhD in his particular area. And in a month, he'd sent me a computer printout of the yields that we got from each tomato, the days to harvest, the length of harvest. God, I mean, he knew what I was wanting, but I hadn't actually articulated it. Yep. And so that's how we got the heirloom vegetable thing going. But in fact, we put up an education centre there, so we did a couple of talks. And so we've still got it there, and now most of our seeds are grown overseas these days. So we've got this perfect piece of land, which is where we'll grow the trees. Whether I'm going to see much in my lifetime, but in effect, we're starting
to
plant.
Me, like I remember before Ruby, who just turned 18, was born, I'd walk. I'd often finish my flower run at 4 o'clock, and then the traffic was at 9 to get back to Monmouth. So I'd do a loop of the Botanic Gardens.
Oh, yes.
And my pockets would, I know you're not supposed to, but my pockets would usually end up with some seed. And I got one seed pod from a Gymea lily, you know, the ones that hang?
Yeah.
And planted them. They all germinated, and I planted them along my drive.
Right.
And, somebody said to me at the Botanic Gardens that it's going to take 20 years to flower. Well, it did.
Well,
it flowered last year.
I'll just remind you that there are cameras everywhere trying to catch you and me.
Well, I also, when we were in Chile, we were in Araucana region.
And, right, that's where we're going next Easter.
Oh, it's incredible.
Fantastic.
Luján is a volcano that you can climb it, but that's where there's still Araucaria araucana species there. And Leo said, get some seed. And I said, well, you know, we've got Buckley's, because no one speaks any English, and we couldn't find any nurseries really.
No.
So we went to the supermarket for a volcano climb the next day.
Oh, yes,
and there's a pallet bin full of chestnut-sized pine nuts.
Yes.
And
that's what the
monkey puzzle trees.
Monkey puzzle, yeah.
And they're the ones that you see on my driveway.
Yeah. I saw that this morning. They're damn slow though. The bunya pine's slow, and this one is slow.
Yeah.
We've got one, and we've got both of them at our garden at St. Ert. So you have to be very patient for that. But yes, no. Well, you've been to the area. We're looking forward to
stunning. I remember seeing the biggest pear tree I've ever seen in my life, and it was over 100 years old.
Right.
But it was like a eucalypt. It was so tall. It was like a mountain ash almost, and it was loaded with pears.
All right.
It was right on the border of Argentina there, but there's some beautiful areas there.
Well, we've got 1,000 cockatoos who sit on the mountains above us, and we've got 4 farms in the valley, but we're the silly ones that have got the fruit trees and the sunflowers and the beans. So
I love the sunflowers.
We don't keep much.
Thank you so much for coming today. And if you're interested in growing anything, become a member. You get this incredible catalogue with always half a dozen great stories, pieces about genetically modified food or trees, or about this project last year. And you get, as a member, access to some really rare seeds that are almost impossible to get otherwise. And grow some food. And Australia's lucky to have an organisation like yours here. And I love also that some seeds that were discovered here went back to the United States. You know, migrants took seeds with them here.
Yep.
And that, you know, we're hoping to celebrate that and make that as mainstream as possible. So Diggers, this book will be available from Diggers?
Yes,
and
out hot off the press.
And along with a whole bunch of other great books that you can get there. Thank you.
Thank you.